If you happen to notice the captain moving a touch slower than, or wincing like a man who's wrestled the rigging and lost, know this: I made a less than glorious descent from the crow's nest and misjudged me step. Caught hold of the rail, but me feet gave way underneath me, and for a brief and memorable moment, I hung there like a tangled sail with the full weight of me body pulling hard upon me seaboard side. Upon my starboard side, shoulder, arm, wrist, and all the lines running clear down to me boots. So if I favor one side tonight, take it not as weakness, but as proof that even a captain must sometimes learn the sea's lessons the hard way. This be a portion where a people groaning under the weight of Egypt cry out to Hashem and are heard, where plagues strike not at random, but with purpose, where a line is drawn between those that are marked and those who are not, where blood upon the doorposts separates life from death, where the sea itself splits before the feet of those who step forward, and a nation of slaves walks out free. Before a people can walk in freedom, they must first remember who it is that calls them. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod, Malchuto, Leolam Vayed. And with that truth anchored, we turn to the treasure hidden within the voyage. As the wind fills the sails and the sound of the deep surrounds us, we set our course upon the words of the Torah. For these words are not carried for display. They are carried so that a man may find his way when the sea grows dark. Strike the course. Let the song arise.
From names once hidden, roots we reclaim. From scattered sparks, we learn our name. Through longest night, the call remains the same. Echoed truth, no time restrained. Treasures in the Torah, long proclaimed. Ancient truth becomes eternal flame. By the Torah's light, we chart our way through darkest night to break of day. Across the seas where exiles roam, the written word becomes our home. What once was hidden now is shown, guiding us where truth has grown. From generations, voice and flame, we rise to walk the path again. Avast me hearties, welcome to Treasures in the Torah. welcome aboard.
There be treasures in the Torah, not of coin nor crown, but of covenant. This be the treasure. But before redemption can be understood, bondage must be seen clearly. In other words, before you can appreciate your freedom, you must first realize the reality of your own bondage. Egypt was not merely a place. It was a system, a structure, a way of life that taught a man that who he was and what he was worth. A slave wakes. A slave works. A slave survives. And after enough time, he forgets. He forgets that he was ever meant to be something else. Egypt did not only place chains on the hands, it placed an identity on the soul. And even the very name itself, Mitzrayim, in the Holy Tongue, a narrow place, a place of constraint, of pressure, of limitation, not just a land, but a condition. Mitzrayim does not only bind the hands, it compresses the soul until a man forgets the size he was meant to live in. And so it is in every generation. Every man has its Mitzrayim, not always a place, but a condition of the soul. A place where fear speaks louder than truth. Where survival replaces purpose. Where a man trades calling for comfort. A narrow place, a constricting place, a place that squashes you down and hunches your back, where a man becomes smaller than who he was created to be, a place where he learns to wear a face just to survive it. So how does Hashem confront a system that reshapes a man's very identity? He does not reform it. He does not get to know the system and become friends with those involved. Nay, he utterly dismantles it. Hashem does not negotiate with Egypt. He dismantles it piece by piece. As it is written in the Torah, against all the gods of Egypt, I will execute judgments. I am Hashem. This was not chaos. This was revelation. Each plague, a strike not only against Egypt, but against the illusion that Egypt was unshakable. Water turned to blood. Darkness that could be felt the collapse of what seemed permanent. And with every blow, the grip of Egypt weakened until at last the system that defined them could no longer hold them. And when the dust settles, a choice must be made. Blood upon the doorposts, not hidden, not private, visible. A declaration that says, I belong to Hashem. But hear this well. This was not a mark that could be washed away. This was not a sign that faded with time. This was not a fad or a cultural phase that eventually just disappeared and became something else. The blood was placed upon wood, upon stone, upon the very structure of the home. And once it was applied, it did not remain upon the surface. Nay, it sank in. It entered the grain of the wood, the pores of the brick. It became part of it. It could not be wiped away. It could not be undone. It could not be hidden. Because when Hashem marks something as his, it is not temporary. And so, every man was faced with a choice: to remain unmarked or to bear a sign that could never be removed. By marking the door is only the beginning. Because once the door opens, you must walk through it. Because when the chains fall off, you are left with a burning question. Who are you without them? Who are you without your chains? Who are you without your bondage? And those questions is not answered with words. This is what Egypt leaves behind. Not chains, but a face that you were taught to wear. A face that speaks when it is expected, that smiles when required, that agrees when it is safer to agree. A face that protects, but also confines. A slave does not ask who he is. He already knows. He is what he was told to be. He moves when commanded. He speaks when permitted. He lives as assigned. He does not question the system, because the system itself has become his identity. And after enough time, alas, he no longer remembers there was ever a man behind the mask. But hear this well. There were those among our people who lived their entire lives behind such a face. And so we turn to our spyglass, to one who knew what it meant to live like this. This week, we turn our spyglass to one who knew this life well. One that we have discussed briefly in the past, Joseph Nasi. But because this be the week of Passover, his reflection and his life is one that actually is quite staggering in comparison to what we are celebrating this week. He was born among the forced ones, the conversos, Jews of Spain and Portugal, who lived beneath the shadow of the Inquisition. Families who appeared as Christians to the world, but within their homes, they clung to the Torah. They went to church services on Sunday, but in their homes, they clung to the Torah. They whispered the Shema in secret. They guarded Shabbat behind closed doors. They buried their dead in silence. They lived as one thing in the open and another in truth. Joseph Nasi was raised in that world, a world where identity was dangerous, where truth could cost you everything, where survival required a mask. But Hashem opened a path. And when that door opened, he did not hesitate. He fled from Portugal through uncertainty, through lands that were not yet safe until he reached the Ottoman Empire. And there, for the first time in his life, he did not have to pretend. And what did he do with that freedom? Did he remain hidden? Did he stay quiet? Did he cling to safety? No. He rose, not just as a free man, but as a Jewish man, openly, boldly. He became a statesman, a counselor to rulers, a man of influence within the Ottoman court. And he used that influence not for himself, but for his people. He helped establish refuge for Jews fleeing persecution. He worked to rebuild Jewish life in lands where it had been shattered. He stood as proof that a man who once lived behind a mask could live fully in the light. He knew what it meant to live behind this. He knew the cost of wearing it. And when Hashem gave him freedom, he refused to carry it any further. And his story is not given to us as history alone, but as a warning. Because what he did must now be faced by every man. Because what was true then still remains true now. Every man has his Mitzrayim. Every man has his Egypt. A pattern, a fear, a voice that he has listened to for so long that it no longer sounds like a lie. It sounds like truth. Some were told they were not enough. Some were told they were too much. Some were taught to stay quiet. Some were taught to perform. And so they learned to survive. They learned how to speak without saying what they believe. They learned how to move without being noticed. They learned how to become what was required in order to endure. And over time, the mask no longer feels like a mask. It feels like an identity. And so, when freedom comes, it is not always welcomed, because freedom demands something that bondage never did: responsibility. No Pharaoh, no system, no one left to blame. They can no longer blame Egypt for their problems. They can no longer blame the harsh labor they experienced at the hands of Pharaoh. All they have to blame is themselves. Only them. So if there is no Pharaoh, if there is no system, if there is no one left to blame, there is only you, standing in the wilderness with nothing but truth in front of you. And many would rather return to Egypt in their hearts than to face that moment. They leave physically, but remain spiritually. They walk free, but still think like slaves. They speak of freedom, but live in fear. Because the chains are gone, but the identity remains. And so the question remains, not for them, but for you. Who are you when the mask is no longer required? Because that answer will determine everything that comes next. And if that question is not answered, then what comes next will reveal it. Our next sail, we carry Egypt with us into the wilderness, into testing, into the place where identity is no longer given, but chosen. Before we close this voyage, I ask you this. If this teaching has stirred something within you, don't keep it to yourself. Drop anchor in the comments below. Tell the crew that what struck you the most and from which harbor you be watching. And if you know another soul who still be walking in their Mitzrayim, share this voyage with them, because sharing is the strongest way to bring treasures to others. It allows the message to reach beyond this dock and into lives that may have never heard it otherwise. Now, Before we depart, let us receive the blessing of Hashem. Yivarecha Adonai v'yishamrecha, Ya'er Adonai panav alecha v'yihunecha, Yasi Adonai panav alecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May Hashem bless you and guard you. May Hashem make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Hashem lift his face towards you and grant you peace. And now, as we close this voyage, I say to you, as we say at the close of every episode, may the wind in your sails be filled with Hashem's righteousness, and may the evil urge plunge straight to Davy Jones' locker. Hag Sameach. Have a wonderful Passover. Shabbat Shalom. Remember the cost of freedom. Remember that often the biggest sign of faith that we have is to remove the mask, never to wear it again, because culture will dictate to us on a daily basis that it is far easier to walk around with the mask on. There is no accountability with this because you are playing a character. You are playing a role. And honestly, if we were to look at our own hearts, it is really not that hard to walk around as a character. But when the mask is removed and our face is revealed to the world, there becomes something that most of us do not care for that much, and that is called accountability. Because we can no longer blame our circumstances. We have only ourselves to blame. And from that, we ourselves cry out to Hashem for forgiveness. Shalom. Happy Passover. Hag Sameach.